Hi, my name's Dr. Padilla. I'm a professor in computer science and psychology, and I've been a faculty member for over 5 years. Today, I wanted to talk about a topic that affects me deeply, and I've gotten several comments about, and that is how to create a work-life balance in academia. This is a unique problem because academia has some special challenges, and I think it can be tricky to know how to really optimize having a great work life and also having a satisfying life outside of academia that really invigorates you. So in this video, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks that have worked for me, as well as things that I've heard that work for my colleagues as well. So there's lots of advice out there about how to manage a work-life balance in different contexts, and the unique thing about what I want to talk about today is specifically for academia. Now, academia is different than maybe other contexts for a few reasons. I think the first is that oftentimes our job in academia is not well defined. If you're a student, a graduate student, a faculty member, there's all of these elements of the job that are not necessarily a part of your job on paper. We get paid for something very specific, but oftentimes the job requires a lot of these other things that we're expected to do for free, on our free time, etc. So it's really hard to know how to manage all of these additional expectations, what our job actually is, when we can say no, when we can take time off, etc. I think that's a little unique to academia, having all of these additional semi-required expectations, but maybe not. Maybe that's the same in other fields. I think a work-life balance can be very challenging for people in academia because of all of these additional expectations. I think the other really challenging thing about work-life balance in academia is that there's lots of bad examples out there. Oftentimes students will come to me and say, why would I want to be in academia? I look at my professors and they are just completely fried out. They work all of the time. They have a horrible work-life balance. And that might be true. They might be failing at balancing their expectations, but that doesn't have to be your journey. There is a lot of ways to be a professor. There's a lot of ways to be in academia. Unfortunately, there's this archetype that has been prevalent that is not a healthy relationship. But I know many academics, including myself, that take time off, that don't respond to emails during their vacation, etc., that aren't always represented in popular culture when you look at a professor. So suffice to say, there is a healthy way to do it. It can be done, but it can be challenging because there's this expectation creep where all of these additional things get added onto your plate as you go through your career. And all of a sudden, you might wake up and find that there's no time for yourself. So I'm going to help you avoid that. So my first piece of advice in managing a work-life balance is knowing exactly what you are evaluated on. I think the secret lie about academia is people want you to believe that you're being evaluated on everything they ask you to do. And they will ask you to do a ton of stuff that you don't need to do necessarily. So for example, you might be asked to volunteer for a committee position. You might be asked to volunteer to develop this different type of course content. You might be asked to volunteer to do this extracurricular outreach type of thing, okay? And when the person is asking you, it might not seem optional, but unless it's a part of your evaluation criteria, it is optional. I'm telling you that right now. So it's important to know what you're actually being evaluated on. And I just want to be very clear that there are 4 main metrics of evaluation in academic settings. And the 4 are publications, citations, course evaluations, and reputation. Okay, and for the first 4 publications, this is how many publications that you have. Okay, it's just a basic count. It also includes what is the prestige of those publications. The next is citations. How much is your work cited? Is it getting known? Is it getting proliferated through scientific research? The next is straightforward. It's just course evaluations, how well students rate your courses if you are teaching courses. And the last one that's a little more ambiguous is reputation. And this is where you might start to see some of the work-life balance get unbalanced because you're worried about your reputation, okay? So the first 3 are straightforward, right? That is a metric that you can achieve. The reputation one is a little bit tricky. What I mean by reputation is when you go up for positions, when you are being evaluated, people will ask around to see what people think of you. Are you a good colleague? Do you do the things that you say you're going to do? Are you someone that they want to have around, right? Your reputation is all of these small relationships that you've built up over time. And you might be a people pleaser and you might think that the way to get a good reputation is to be the person who is always doing what is asked of you. Maybe someone comes to you and asks you to review their article or write a part of this grant or volunteer your time in some other way, and you think in order to build your reputation, you have to do all of those things. I'm telling you, you do not. I think when you see reputations really matter is when people have personal connections and they're willing to vouch for someone, okay? So this might be something where you've worked closely with another collaborator over years and you're applying to work at their institution and they're going to bat for you because they know you specifically. And that's not you did a few things that they asked you to do. That's you went to dinner with them, you know the name of their kids. That's the type of kind of reputational points that you should be shooting for, more of the networking type of things. What tends to happen that eats into work-life balance is there is a type of person who fills their day with these kind of secretarial type tasks. They're the ones that are developing materials, that are, doing all of these little items for everyone. And they do develop a reputation of being that person who's doing all the busy work. Does that get them a job? No, it doesn't. Someone might write a letter and say, they're an excellent colleague who has, been a team player. But if they don't have the citations or the publications, it doesn't matter. The citations, the publications, to some degree, the course evaluations, that is what matters. So building these kind of reputation points kind of across the board rather than really strengthening strong connections, like true personal connections with people. I think that's where you want to think about your reputation coming into play, not necessarily needing to do everything for everyone. That is not necessarily going to help you. Sometimes it's actually going to hurt you. The ways that it might hurt you is that people will not believe that you're focusing on your research, that you're not dedicated to your research because you're doing all of these other things, all of this busy work. So just be very careful of that. Okay, so once you know that you're evaluated just on a few metrics and not on other things, then you need to start prioritizing yourself within reason, okay? So this involves setting clear boundaries. For example, I know some faculty members who work 9 to 5 and they don't answer emails outside of that time period. They pack in all of the work they need to do in those periods and they focus on the things they're being evaluated on. They do them well during that period and they let it go if it's outside of that period. And that is completely fine. I think that's an excellent way to work. I don't personally have that particular boundary, but what you need to do is figure out what your boundaries are and try to establish them within reason. There's some boundaries that are unreasonable. For example, I was working on a project where one faculty member decided they only wanted to meet on Mondays and the other faculty member decided they only wanted to meet on Wednesdays, and I needed to get us all three in a room. What do you guys want me to do? You need to find a time that you're both willing to meet. But I get it. They're prioritizing, their life, their family, etc. But I think there's a way to do it within reason, to be flexible in some ways and inflexible in other ways. Now, in order to do that correctly, you need to know what is important to you. What fuels you? Everything cannot be important to you. You have to find the things that are necessary for your health. For example, for me, it is necessary for me to exercise every day. I truly need to do that. When I don't exercise, I feel bad, I eat poorly, everything spirals. So carving out time in the morning for me is really important for me to do that. When I was in graduate school, I knew that. And I actually started work at noon, which, sounds crazy to start work at noon, but I would exercise during the morning, kind of gather myself, have a nice lunch, start work at noon and work till probably about 7-ish. And I may or may not go into the office because I didn't necessarily need to, because I was playing to what I was being evaluated on. If I was getting those publications, citations, and doing well with my classes, then everything else was fine and I was able to prioritize what I needed to be healthy. So I think you need to figure out what is your thing. What makes you invigorated? What makes you excited and happy? That can sometimes be hard to find. I know some people who like to have a really strong hobby that they do outside of academia that really grounds them. I know other people who are really prioritize relationships, so they feel best when they're really connected with their family or their partner, or they get time to go to dinner with friends, that type of thing. It's important for you to figure out what that is. So one way to do that is to think about a time in your life when you felt the best. What were you doing during that time? What are some things that correlated with you feeling the best? And see if you can identify some of those core elements that you can ensure that you're doing regularly to make sure you have a work-life balance. I know a lot of people just need to get out into nature, and that feels very useful. That might not be your thing. You might hate nature, so you need to find your thing. I think that's the key here. Now, when you're prioritizing yourself, you're going to be in a position where people are asking you to do things that you don't want to do. What do? You need to find a good way to say no. Okay, so one of my favorite tips that has been really helpful for me in terms of saying no is having a no committee. And a woman recommended doing this early on in my career, and it's very much served me. And basically what happens is if someone asks me to do something, serve on some committee, do some extracurricular thing, I will email it to her and say, should I say yes to this? And she usually writes back, no, just one word, no. And then I can respond to the person and say, I consulted my mentor and she indicated that this wasn't the right time for this particular opportunity. Thank you so much for thinking of me. Maybe it's something I could engage with in the future. So you can say something like that. You can also politely decline by indicating that now you currently do not have the time. So for example, someone might want you to review a paper. You can say, thank you so much for considering me. I really appreciate it. Unfortunately, I have a full slate of reviews lined up, and I don't have time to commit to any more just yet. Something like that. So it's a way of saying no, but describing why you're saying no. And you want to make sure and thank someone for considering you, and letting them know that they should consider you in the future. They may or may not consider you in the future if you've said no, but that's kind of a polite way to decline a offer. The other part of saying no is also not volunteering. Many of the things we end up doing are because we volunteered to do it. We thought maybe it was a good opportunity, or maybe we were just in a room where they were looking for volunteers and no one volunteered. So you felt socially pressured to volunteer. Don't. Use restraint. Just sit in the silence when they say, is anyone willing to volunteer for this? Just sit in the silence and don't be the person that volunteers, because all of those things will eat up at your time. You are not getting paid to do really any of those things if they're not based on your metrics, the things you're being evaluated on. So do not do them. The next thing I want to talk about in terms of managing a work-life balance is once you've sort of established what you do want to do, the next thing you want to do is to figure out how you're spending your time in a week. So what I would encourage you to do is to track what you're doing throughout a week. And I think this is a very useful practice because it will give you evidence and data about how you're spending your time. So for example, what you might do is you might, on a piece of paper, very simply, write down each thing you're doing as you're doing it and how long it took you to do that. So you have a list like this, okay? Once you have your list of what you've done over the course of a week for each day, what I want you to do then is to go through and highlight the things that you are actually being evaluated on. So you want to be very clear about what you're being evaluated on and what you're not. What are those busy things that are filling up your time? The next thing I want you to do is try to brainstorm ways to cut the things that you're not being evaluated on in half in terms of time. So for example, I'm dyslexic. It takes me a very long time to write emails. If I were to read and write all the emails out in long form, it'd probably take me about 45 minutes per email. Let's say I have 5 that I have to respond to that day. That's several hours that is gone. What I have been able to do is find a way to optimize using technology to do that task more quickly. So for example, I will speak the text that I want to be in the email to my computer. It has a dictation app, and then the text is very bad. It's very bad at hearing and recording my voice. So I put that into ChatGPT and I ask it just to clean it up, and it reworks the language so it makes sense, and then I send that in an email, okay? Is it exactly what I wanted to say? No. Is it a good email? No, because it's not what I'm being evaluated on. I could craft a good email and go through all these rounds of revisions, but why? I'm not being evaluated on it. So that task needs to be happening quickly and easily, and the quality of it can be lower. Let's think about another thing. Maybe you're a student and you're taking courses, okay? Let's say a graduate student. If you're a graduate student, your grades do not matter anymore. Maybe you are spending 10, 12 hours, 15 hours in a class and you're getting an A. I'm telling you, your grades do not matter If you get any passing grade, it counts. So you should be shooting for a B, okay? So you can probably cut the amount of hours that you're spending at least by a third. Maybe you only spend 8 hours in the class to get a B, and that is sufficient. You have to think about it as you're trying to kick a field goal, right? Where it just has to get through the uprights. It doesn't have to be a perfect kick, it just has to make it through, okay? So you wanna cut the amount of time you're spending on all of the non-essential things to reduce them as much as humanly possible. So that's what you wanna do with your list here. The other thing that I want you to do is throughout your day, I want you to have a timeline, and I want you to plot your energy levels really simply. I have basically a timeline here, goes from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., and then I have energy on the Y, where 0 is low energy, 10 is high energy. What I want you to do is throughout your day, as you're recording, I want you to mark your energy levels. So you might start high, go low, get high again, etc. Something like this. You might end up having a plot that looks something like this, maybe very different than this. The next thing that I want you to do is when you're going to organize your time after you've done this activity, you take the items that you've highlighted, the ones that you're going to be evaluated on, that serve your metric. I want you to put those during the times that you have high energy levels. The trick is that you want to have the most energy, the most cognitive and brain power for the tasks that are the most important. And for the other tasks, the ones that don't matter, like sending emails, do that when your brain is out, when it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. Save the best parts of your cognitive stimulation for the most important tasks. Doing this data-driven approach to reorganizing your week will really help you with that. And I think this takes a lot of discipline, because oftentimes you might feel very invigorated and excited, and that's when you start doing things like pulling up social media, right? And you're wasting the best part of your brain on non-essential tasks. And that is a huge reason why your work-life balance might be off, because you find that you're trying to pull time away in other ways to make up for kind of wasting the best part of your brain. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is optimizing your free time, your personal time. We've talked a lot about reducing non-essential tasks, prioritizing your energy throughout the day, but I think you also need to optimize your energy levels for the things that you do love, the things that make you invigorated and excited. Now, what can happen is similar to how you have non-important tasks during work, you can have non-important personal tasks that don't actually invigorate you. Maybe it's something like scrolling through social media. That's a personal thing that you can do on your personal time, but is it giving you energy? Is it making you feel like the best form of yourself? So I want you to also try to prioritize the things that make you feel the best and make those essential. Make sure you do those things, and you can fill it in with other non-essential personal activities, but really maximize that personal time you have and don't waste it by doing things that don't feed you. I hope this was helpful. I think there's a lot more to say about managing a work-life balance. I certainly struggle with it. I'm still struggling with it today. It's a process for me that has evolved over time. And I would say if you're struggling with it now, just be very kind to yourself. We have ebbs and flows in our lives, and I think that just by watching this video, by knowing that you're going to try and think about that, that's already a step forward. Be really generous to yourself and know that the way that you feel right now is not necessarily the way you're going to feel tomorrow. It will get better, and you will be able to find more of a balance and feel that this academic career is sustainable. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button and comment down below. Take care.